News this morning. A former Ukrainian defense official calls President Trump's order to halt all military aid to Ukraine, quote, probably one of the biggest shocks of the war. Joining us now, CNN senior military analyst, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Admiral James Stavridis. We should note Admiral Stavridis is a partner at the Carlyle Group, a global investment firm, and he serves on the board or advises for a handful of defense-related companies. Admiral, very nice to see you. Our Nick Payton-Walsh on the ground in Ukraine just heard from a Ukrainian official who tells him they could run out of artillery shells by May if the United States continues this pause in military aid. What would the impact of that be?
Oh, it would be devastating on the front lines. This really has turned into a World War I level battle of artillery back and forth, tanks moving back and forth, trench warfare. John, if it were a novel, it would be All Quiet on the Western Front. It is the coin of the realm in this conflict at this moment are those artillery shells. So the Europeans have some capacity here, but they're going to have to really stoke their own fires. And by May, that's going to be a real problem on the battlefield.
The question is, Key Bono, who benefits from this decision by President Trump to halt military aid?
Gosh, let me think. It's got to be Vladimir Putin. And by the way, we underestimate this, but it's also Xi Jinping in China, who is looking covetously at that small democracy nearby called Taiwan. It benefits Iran, which is pumping military aid into Russia for the war in Ukraine. It benefits North Korea. Gosh, are those the countries we want to be aligned with? I say no.
Admiral, your life has been spent in the military, but in the senior echelons, of course, politics and diplomacy do factor in. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is now faced with a choice. I mean, President Trump is demanding a public apology in order to get aid reinstated. What would you advise President Zelensky to do?
I wouldn't apologize, but I would advise him, and I think this is what he's going to do, John, align himself closely with the Europeans, perhaps go back to Washington as part of a European group led by Emmanuel Macron of France and Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom, up the discussions of the mineral deal. Trump really wants that, and indicate that you want to work with Washington, but you also are going to work with the Europeans so that the Europeans provide more support for you. I think that's the package of the deal that could get done. Look, in finance and international business, we often say no deal is ready until it's died at least twice. Let's give this one a couple more rounds. Final thought here, by the way, John. The Europeans, we talked a moment ago about their challenges in getting artillery shells, but broadly speaking, Europe has immense capacity. Europe collectively is 450 million people. It's the second largest economy in the world, 22% of the world's GDP. They have excellent defense firms there, BAE, Thales, Airbus, Saab. They don't just make cars, they make Gripen fighters. The Europeans over time, over a year or two, can really put a lot of capacity on that battlefield. The key is going to be getting through the next few months if Team Trump seriously cuts off the taps. I hope they don't.
Well, very briefly, let's talk more about Europe for the moment. And I have seen figures that the Europeans and NATO countries have increased their defense spending substantially over the last couple of years, which has been a goal of the Biden administration and the Trump administration before that. But, and I know you've done a lot of thinking about this, does Europe need to start thinking about a NATO without the United States, which of course would not make it NATO, but a system without the United States?
I think it does. There's two ways that could manifest. The United States could effectively withdraw from NATO. That would be a geopolitical mistake of epic proportion, but it would leave you with what we could call ETO, European Treaty Organization, NATO without the U.S. It would still be by far the most powerful military collection on earth. Has nuclear power because of France and Germany, nuclear weapons. So That's one way it could go. Or the European Union, and by the way, one of the strongest figures supporting Ukraine is the head of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, former defense minister of Germany. The Europeans just yesterday committed to over $900 billion of defense spending. I think the light is going on, not only in Brussels, but across the continent, that they need to be prepared to go it alone if the United States continues down this reckless and dangerous course of walking away from Ukraine.
Admiral Stavridis, nice to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being with us.